Gustave Courbet. Ornans, France, 1819. De la Tour de Pilz, Switzerland, 1877. Courbet rejected idealism and led the way in realism. He was one of the movement's first and most dedicated exponents, expressing his political and social commitment in paintings of outstanding technical achievement. Brought up in rural Franche-Comté, in eastern France, Courbet went to Paris in 1840 to study law. In fact, he spent his time studying works in the Louvre and resolved to become an artist, with the financial backing of his father. After some initial success, Courbet's works were rejected as unconventional, and he became increasingly anti-establishment. A trip to Ornans confirmed his dislike of the rarefied Beaux-Arts, prompting him to adopt the Realist style. He was a leading figure in the Paris Commune, opposite, who seized power in Paris following the Franco-Prussian War, but after its collapse in 1871 he fled to Switzerland and spent his final years there. Lifeline. 1840 moves to Paris, aged 21, 1844 Courbet with a black dog accepted by Paris Salon, 1847 sees the work of Dutch masters in the Netherlands, 1849 first realist paintings 1855 the artist's studio is rejected by the Exposition Universelle, 1866 begins a series of erotic paintings, including The Notorious Origin of the World. 1871 takes charge of art museums in Paris Commune, 1871 arrested for dismantling the Vendôme column, a monument to Napoleon, 1873 flees France to escape paying a huge fine for the rebuilding of the monument, 1877 dies, exiled in Switzerland. The essence of realism is its negation of the ideal. The expression of beauty is in direct ratio to the power of conception the artist has acquired. Gustave Courbet. The Stone Breakers in one of his first overtly realist paintings, Courbet starkly portrays the unglamorous work of laborers. This rebellion against the romantic conventions of the time gained him some notoriety when exhibited at the Salon of 1850. 1849, Oil on Canvas, destroyed in 1945, 159 by 259 centimeters, Galerie Neue Meister, Dresden, Germany. The artist's studio subtitled A Real Allegory of 7 Years of My Artistic and Moral Life. This painting shows Courbet at work surrounded by the world of commonplace life. On the left, an admiring group of friends, including novelist George Sand, art critic Charles Baudelaire, and politician Pierre-Joseph Proudhon on the right. In the center, turning his back on a voluptuous nude symbolizing artistic tradition, the artist paints a landscape under the gaze of a small boy and his dog. 185, oil on canvas, 361 x 598 cm, Musée d'Orsay, Paris, France. In context. Paris Commune. In the uprising following the Franco-Prussian War, a citizens' militia seized power in Paris, demanding a democratic and social republic. The Commune governed Paris from March to May 1871, but it had great political significance as a model for future left-wing and anarchist revolutionary movements. Destruction of the Vendôme column. 1871 Courbet was responsible for the city's art museums during the short-lived Commune. He supervised the toppling of the Vendôme column commemorating Napoleon, for which he was subsequently imprisoned. Burial at Ornans. The funeral of Courbet's granduncle was thought an unconventional and mundane subject for a painting in 1850, especially one on such a massive scale. The portrayal of ordinary people, rather than royalty or historical figures, was a statement of his socialist beliefs. His choice of this working-class ceremony was, he said, in reality, the burial of Romanticism. 1849-50, oil on canvas, 314 by 663 centimeters, Musée d'Orsay, Paris, France. Closer look. Symmetrical composition. The painting is divided into two distinct rectangles either side of the central grave. To the left stand the robed clergy and dignitaries, to the right less colorful townspeople. The symmetry is emphasized by contrasting vertical lines formed by the cross and the mourner in the foreground. Rural sobriety in contrast to the pageantry and sumptuous clothes associated with traditional depictions of ceremonies. Courbet shows townsfolk attending the funeral in somber mood and wearing their slightly shabby Sunday best. Camille Corot. B. Paris, 1796, D. Paris, 1875. A major influence on the next generation of French artists, Camille Corot to some extent anticipated Impressionist landscapes. After a short-lived career in the family's drapery business, he turned to painting, with the help of a small allowance from his father, in his 20s, and in 1827 first had work accepted at the Salon. His reputation started to grow, and he soon established himself as a successful artist, working from sketches made on his travels around France and Italy, and slowly developing a very personal style. Although a supporter of the realist artists of the Barbizon school, see page 324, his commercial success allowed him to help Domé and Millet financially. He did not share their concern for the social connotations of landscape. Figures appear only incidentally, if at all, in his landscapes. Lifeline. 1796. Born in Paris, the son of a draper, 1825 visits Rome and Venice. 1827 The bridge at Narni is shown at the Paris Salon. 1834 travels around Italy, sketching and painting. 1836 spends time in Avignon and the south of France. 1846 receives the Cross of the Légion d'honneur. 1872 buys a cottage for the homeless Domé. 1875 dies and is buried in Père Lachaise Cemetery, Paris. The goatherd beside the water. Corot's later work shows a softening of the landscape, presaging Impressionism. The distant view, misty lake, translucent trees, and sole human figure are all frequent features of Corot's landscapes. 1843, Oil on Canvas, 81x65 cm, private collection. The Woman with the Pearl. Though primarily a landscape artist, Corot was equally skilled in figure painting. During his later career, he produced a number of female nudes and portraits of friends and family. He never exhibited any of these, preferring to keep his private and public art completely separate. C. 1842, Oil on Canvas, 70x55 cm, Louvre, Paris, France. The Gardens of the Villa d'Este, Tivoli. Corot made several trips to Italy, and liked to make landscape sketches that he could develop into full-scale paintings back in his studio. He aimed to capture the scenes just as he saw them. This plein-air, outdoor, approach, which paved the way for young painters such as Camille Pissarro, allowed him to develop a freer, more naturalistic style within the classical French tradition. 1843, Oil on Canvas, 28x50 cm, Louvre, Paris, France. Closer look. Subtle colors. Corot tended to use a limited range of colors, preferring to achieve his effects through subtle tonal relationships of light and dark, and a creamy surface texture created using small, quick brushstrokes. Théodore Rousseau. B. Paris, 1812, D. Barbizon, 1867. Nicknamed /E Grand Refuse for his frequent rejection by the Paris Salon, Rousseau was the leading member of the Barbizon school of landscape painters. Uncomfortable with the neoclassical formality then current in France, he based his style on 17th and century Dutch landscapes, as well as on the work of contemporaries such as John Constable. Unusually for the time, he painted outdoors. Although he struggled early in his career, by the end of his life he was an acclaimed figure, and his posthumous reputation was for a time enormous. Home Oaks, Apremont. Rousseau's landscapes portray nature as powerful rather than idyllic. His ability to represent a scene realistically was much admired by his fellow romantics, even if not by the establishment. 1850-52, Oil on Canvas, 63 by 99 cm, Louvre, Paris, France. The Forest at Fontainebleau, morning. Working directly from nature in the open air, Rousseau was adept at capturing the subtle contrasts of light and shade, especially the effects of sunlight through foliage, using small, carefully handled brushstrokes. 1850, Oil on Canvas, 97x134 cm, Wallace Collection, London, UK. Closer look. Framing arch. The effects of sunlight through foliage were a recurrent subject for Rousseau. In this, and several similar paintings, the eye is drawn towards a central area of light through an arched frame of trees. Carl Spitzweg. B. Munich, 1808, D. Munich, 1885. The most enduring of the Biedermeier group of artists, Carl Spitzweg took up painting comparatively late in life and with no formal training, having previously worked as a pharmacist. He began his artistic career in the 1830s, becoming an active member of the artistic community in his native Munich. Having struggled to attain recognition for his anecdotal paintings of Bavarian life, Spitzweg spent some years traveling before taking on work as a graphic artist for the satirical Munich magazine Fliegen Flying Leaves, putting his work before a wider public. Spitzweg's acutely observed caricatures and studies of provincial life are sympathetic rather than politically critical, and his gentle humor soon made him popular across Europe. Lifeline. 1808, born into a middle-class family in Munich. 1825–28, trains as pharmacist in Vienna. 1828, works in a Munich pharmacy while doing postgraduate studies. 1833, inherits enough money to become a painter. 1835, joins the Kunstverein, Munich. Leaves 2 years later. 1837, first version of The Poor Poet, his best-known work. 1839, travels to Dalmatia. 1840s, travels around Austria, Switzerland, and the Adriatic. 1844–52, works as illustrator for Fliegen magazine. 1860, turns to landscapes. 1885, dies in Munich. Sunday stroll from about 1850. Spitzweg's attention moved away from the figures in his paintings to their surroundings, which provides an appropriate setting to the action. He increasingly turned to landscape painting. Influenced by the Barbizon school, he created idyllic rural scenes into which he could insert his whimsical petit bourgeois characters. 1841, Oil on Canvas, Museum Carolino Augusteum, Salzburg, Austria. The bookworm Spitzweg frequently shows his subjects indulging their middle-class enthusiasms, such as butterfly collecting, mineralogy, or in this case literature, gently poking fun at their absurdity. Spitzweg himself was widely traveled and somewhat detached from this provincial world. 1850, Oil on Canvas, 27x50 centimeters, private collection. In context. Biedermeier, originally the pseudonym of a contributor to Fliegen Blätter, Biedermeier is now a general term for the urban, middle-class arts in early 19th century Germany and Austria, which emphasized domesticity and sober simplicity, often tending to the sentimental. Family group by Franz Schrank, c. 1810. This scene expresses the Biedermeier values of modesty and respectability, a reaction against the political and expressive preoccupations of Romanticism. Ferdinand Georg Waldmuller. B. Vienna, 1793, Dhintrbruhl, 1865. Ferdinand Waldmüller, the foremost Austrian landscape artist of the Biedermeier period, based his meticulous technique on a close study of nature rather than an adherence to any particular style of painting. He trained at the Vienna Academy, and, after working as a private tutor in Croatia and a short period as a portrait painter, he returned there as a professor in 1829. His naturalist, however, at odds with the Academy's ideology, despite approach was his growing reputation and influence as a teacher, he was eventually dismissed. As well as a huge number of landscapes, Waldmüller painted many sentimental rural scenes, which were popularly successful, although not so highly regarded today. He was reinstated at the Academy in 1864, just 1 year before his death. Lifeline. 1793, born in Vienna. 1817–20, studies at the Vienna Academy. 1825, travels to Italy. 1829, appointed professor at the Vienna Academy. 1857, dismissed after disputes with the Academy. 1862, a major exhibition of his work is held in London. 1864, reinstated as professor at the Vienna Academy. 1865, dies in Hinterbrühl, Austria, aged 72. Coming home from the war, Waldmiller's later work included a series of paintings of peasant life in a sentimental mood, contrasting starkly with his detailed naturalist technique. 1859, Oil on Panel, 42 by 53 centimeters, Kunsthal, Hamburg, Germany. Hallstatt's a belief in the naturalistic depiction of the subject based on close study and observation led to an almost photographic realism and detail in Waldmiller's landscapes. In particular, he used his considerable technical skills and sensitivity to color to reproduce a scene, rather than interpret it, and allow the subject to speak for itself. 1838, Oil on Canvas, Historisches Museum der Stadt Wien, Vienna, Austria. Closer look. Light and dark contrasts are sharply defined in this landscape, leading diagonally across the painting, from the luminous sky down the mountains to a rooftop, and through the long shadows to the lowest point.